Hello, my name is Spencer Phillips. I'm the co-founder of the Passions Project. Today we have something very, very special for you to watch. An interview with Patricia Ward Kelly. I think I was about 5 years old when I first saw Singing in the Rain. The legendary Gene Kelly was in that movie, and of course, a movie that inspired so many people to love show business, the heyday of show business, and of course, witness the most amazing dancing that anyone had seen. A true gentleman and a true inspiration to many to this very day. Patricia has an amazing career to talk about, has an amazing amount to discuss with her work for the Gene Kelly Foundation, continuing to tell Gene's story around the world. It is an absolute privilege, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce Patricia Ward Kelly.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to another edition of Passions. And today, when I say I'm delighted, I really mean I'm delighted to be talking to a lady over in Los Angeles. And we are kind of, you could say that we're in the company of kind of showbiz royalty, directly or indirectly. And we'll talk about that today. I'm delighted to be welcoming Patricia Kelly to the show. Patricia, thanks very much for joining me on Passions. Tell us who you are and what you're passionate about.
Oh, thank you, Phil. I'm delighted to be here with you. And I am, as you said, Patricia Kelly, and I am the wife and the biographer of the legendary dancer, director, choreographer, Gene Kelly. And my passion is to promote his legacy and to keep it going for future generations and to correct the myths and to perpetuate him long after I kick the bucket. So, and that's what I devote about 24 hours a day to every day.
Well, so far, all I can say is it's working. It's working very well. That's all I can say on it. Okay, so is this something that you discussed with Gene before he passed away? Or did you just decide to do this once he'd gone and as a way of just keeping his memory alive? Or was it something you talked about before he passed away?
Well, it's a good question. It sort of evolved because, as you may know, Gene brought me out to California to write his memoir. He was so unhappy with the published accounts of his life, and the internet really didn't exist. That would drive him crazy. But the books that were out, he was really upset because of the inaccuracies in them. And so he wanted to tell his own story. And so he brought me out and asked if I would stay to write his memoir. And I said yes, thinking I would stay maybe a couple of weeks to interview him. And we ended up getting married 5 years into that process. So I recorded him in some fashion nearly every day for over 10 years. And that is the basis of a lot of the work that I do. But to answer your question specifically, he was very specific in what he asked me to do. He said that he wanted to be remembered for being behind the camera, not so much as a performer, but for being the creative artist, the man who conceived the numbers, conceived the directing, and also for changing the look of dance on film, for using the camera to capture dance in a different way, and for creating an American style of dance, because before Gene, you really didn't see that style. And that involved even changing the costume of the dance on film. So down to the khaki pants and the tight t-shirts and the caps and things that he wore and the loafers with the light socks. So he said to me, if anybody is going to do this, it will be you. And so I've always felt like he sits right here and is just kind of a little reminder that I have this, it's kind of a, well, I'd say a responsibility to him to, because I essentially promised that I would do that. And I feel also he entrusted me not only with his name, his voice, his likeness, his signature, but also with his archives, with his collection. So I feel that I'm not really the owner of those things. I feel like I'm really more of a steward. I'm the one who was entrusted with them, and I have to protect them in archival sleeves, and then I'm working to see that those will all go up into the cloud to the International Museum of Dance, so that those will go on in perpetuity and for people all around the world. So it isn't just somebody has to go to a collection in Boston or in New York, or that dancers in Australia will be able to click onto this and see Gene's belongings, see his Converse tennis shoes, hear his voice, hear the way that he describes what he did, see his handwritten choreography for things like Singing in the Rain. So it's multifaceted, what I'm doing. And one of the things for what would have been his 100th birthday in 2012, the Academy of Motion Pictures always does a tribute to, or then did a tribute to the legends. And I knew that that was coming up. So I reached out to them saying that I would like to craft that. And they very generously allowed me to do that. And that has then morphed into a one-woman show that I've been touring around the world with since 2012. And then I created a big new live symphony tribute to Gene. So the clips are played up on the screen, and then the orchestra plays live to those on the stage, and then I'm there weaving these stories in between. And that premiered with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra in Glasgow and Edinburgh in 2018, and then went to Ireland and Canada. We just did Seattle here. And so that, now that we're kind of emerging from the post-COVID time, I'm working to get those two shows back out, as I was on the road constantly, and now we're just kind of slowly getting those back out again.
Oh, absolutely wonderful. And it's certainly definitely keeping the legacy alive, which I think is a wonderful thing. Talking about the passions then. So as far as Gene was concerned, what do you think, if I asked him what his passion was, do you think he would have said acting and performing, or do you think it'd have, well, you're shaking your head, so he'd have probably said what, the behind the scenes choreography? Yeah,
was for changing the look of dance on film. It was for creating, it was for conceiving new things. He was a tremendous innovator and really radical. People don't think of it all the time now, how revolutionary he was and how far ahead of his time he was. So he was constantly looking for new ways to capture dance on film, and things like blending live action and animation, back with CoverGirl, and well, with Anchors Away in 1945, when he danced with Jerry the Mouse. Now we look at that kind of thing and we sort of take it for granted, but you think how that really had not been done. It had been done by Disney, but quite primitively, nothing as executed as dancing with a live performer. And then the CoverGirl, when he's dancing with himself on screen, and that he said was the hardest thing he ever did, that he had to dolly and pan in double exposure. I mean, it was, all the technicians said it couldn't be done. Even the director of the picture, Charles Vidor, said it couldn't be done, and shut down the picture and left. And Gene was able to do it. And the continued experimentation with animation. So I think he definitely, it was not the performing part, because he said he really would have preferred to create the things for somebody else to perform, because it wasn't the thrill for him to be in front of the camera. It never was. But remarkably, most people couldn't execute the things that he created for himself. So I think we're lucky that he did put those on camera, but he really wanted to be known as the guy behind, and not the guy that we all know up on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think he would have made of the modern age, Patricia? You know, CGI, you know, and all the different technologies and everything. What do you think he might have made of it all? Think he would have enjoyed it because it was innovation in its own right, even if it was technological innovation?
I think he would have. He was even experimenting with kind of primitive 3D technology when he was in the Navy and in World War II. So I think he would have appreciated having more of these tools available to him. But I think one thing that would bother him would be that with it all, we kind of went, the pendulum swung almost too far. So we lost some of the humanity. We lost the something that's very special and very heartwarming. I think about when you see Gene and Jerry the Mouse, and that Gene is performing with real, like when he created the great parade scene in Hello Dolly that he's directing. I mean, those are real extras out there, and I think there's a different feeling, there's a different texture. Something that gets lost when you kind of over CGI everything. Everything is just it's too contrived, and I think you lose a bit of the humanity and the power of it. And I was hearing from some of my friends who teach animation at the universities around, and they said that their students, after swinging so far to one side, wanting to know all the digital possibilities, are now wanting to learn how to draw again. And I think when you look at the early Disney films, when it was all hand-drawn animation and everything, there's a charm and an essence to that I think sometimes gets lost. I think that's why something like Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio hit a real chord with people, because it had a depth to it, because it was the kind of claymation movement and gotten away from just strictly digital work. So I think Gene always was looking to the next thing. He wanted to see what the next generations were doing. He was always interested in it, interested in the music. He would have me go out to Tower Records on Sunset Boulevard to bring home the little cassettes of the top 10 latest, greatest hits. So it might be Prince's Purple Rain or Janet Jackson, or just he was never stuck in the past. He was always looking to the future. And I think one of the things that would be troubling to him now is the way it's almost like we've gone backward in how we capture dance on film, because I think we've gotten this sense that we have to make everything so hyper that, and I'm told by people that, oh, well, you have to do that. You have to make it all like this and chopped up, because otherwise you don't keep people's attention. And I just don't buy that. Then why are people still 71 years later lining up to see Singing in the Rain and American in Paris? And I think people are yearning for that type of entertainment, but they're not being fed that because nobody's creating things like that. Or let's say the majority are not. The very quick cuts of the many dancing competitions on screen, the trying to make it really exciting and everything, instead of just kind of relaxing into and having faith in audiences who are perfectly happy. My one-woman show runs 2 hours and 20 minutes with no interval, and I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds who sit through it multiple times. And and they're not squirming in their seats, and they're glued to it. So I think if you create really solid entertainment, your audience is there. But I think, sadly, Gene isn't here, and I wish he were here to. I was just thinking the other day that I know directors like Damien Chazelle, who did La La Land and Babylon, and who came here to the house to see the archives with Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling and the choreographer Mandy Moore, really studies Gene's films and deeply appreciates the work. And Greta Gerwig, whose idol was Gene, and has infused her film Barbie with American in Paris, Singing in the Rain, The Young Girls of Rochefort, Xanadu. I was just thinking the other day that I just wish Gene were here so that he could work with them. He could be sort of on the set and just provide his knowledge. And because I think they're like sponges, and I think they would mop it up, and they would be respectful and appreciate that. And so I'm sorry, I try to convey as much as I possibly can of his knowledge and the way that he saw things, the way he always said that you shoot head on and full figure. You don't shoot at a strange angle and distort the dance, and you don't chop it up. You edit on the, like, you don't see the cuts in his work because very often he's cutting on a turn, so you don't notice it. And he always made sure that you can see that there's no stunt, there's no fakery in what he's doing. So the way he cuts it, he executes the stunt, and then there might be a cut or a turn. All of those things I can convey, but there's nothing like having Gene there on the set. And I miss him every day for other reasons, but I wish he were there, because I think there are a lot of these young creators who are looking to create really new, solid, innovative work. They're trying to break away from the tradition, which is to just make a Broadway musical into a film, or a film into a Broadway musical. They're creating new work. And as Gene always said, it's so risky because making a musical is so terribly expensive. And what the advantage that they had at MGM was, it was like a repertory company. So everybody's under that same roof. So you had the composers, the dancers, the choreographers, the directors, songwriters, lyricists. They're all there on this MGM lot. Now you have to pull them from London, France, Canada, and it's terribly expensive and over. I think it's a huge risk that most studios today don't wish to take.
Sure. I think it's fascinating. And whenever I've watched any footage of him and dancing, etc., excuse me, try that again. Whenever I've actually watched any footage of him dancing and such like, it always seems so effortless. But is it fair to say that we don't understand the amount of work and effort and practice that has to go into making it look so effortless? Is that a fair observation?
Yes, and beyond. He always said it was so difficult to make it appear so effortless, because he had to conceive it so that it would appear that he's just a guy going down the streets dancing and singing in puddles. But that was all created on this little screen that ran in his head, and he had to then go in and choreograph, put it on himself, put it on the other characters, and actually choreograph the puddles that had to be dug out, the minute detail that went into it. So I think, but he really was trying to make it appear accessible, so that he was dancing like the quote common man, so that a guy on the street. And this is what I always hear, is that people think, well, I can do that. I can do that. And they try it, and they send me pictures of them hanging off of with umbrellas off of lampposts and things. But I think that's one of the greatest qualities for him, is that he makes it, instead of appearing elitist and kind of off-putting, he makes it appear like this is part of us. I often hear from people, they'll say, I feel like I could just sit down with him and have a beer. And that's the character that he's created. And that's the way his work is created. And I think a lot of that is that the movement is based on the athletics that he loved, the sports that he loved as a kid. So you see the hockey and baseball, and you see that his dance, instead of all being up high, he brings it lower to the ground, and he's deep in, and his body is bent. He was a classically trained ballet dancer, so you do see that incredible upward line. But then he is able to even break that line, and because he knew the movement so well. But I think it's he didn't want to continue the European tradition of ballroom dancing on polished floors and with rich people, with people in white tie and tails and furs and jewels, because that was not his upbringing. He was a lower middle class Irish Catholic kid, and was actually taunted for being Irish and Catholic and lower middle class. And so he resented that. And as the Depression hit, his father lost his job. So he related more to the people, the guys on the street, than he related to the rich people who survived a lot of that problem. So I think, but it always was funny, and it's still funny to me now that people say, "Oh, I think I could do that. It looks so easy. He makes it look so easy." And I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, what went into that? The number of hours of rehearsal, and the strength of his body, and also the conception of the movement." I think it wasn't, he didn't get up and wiggle around. It was all conceived in his head. He knew what he was going for. He didn't. Nowadays, a lot of the choreographers do just kind of get up and experiment with things, and they work with the dancers it's kind of a collaborative effort. For Gene, it was Gene choreographed the things.
I mean, we talk a lot now, don't we, about authenticity, and I'm hearing that word when you talk about that. And we also are very used to what is almost pretty much instant gratification. And I think it's probably even worse nowadays that people think that it must be easy. Would you say that he had high self-belief and confidence, Patricia, in what he was doing? Was there any self-doubt in there, or was he highly motivated and highly confident?
Well, I think he was highly motivated for sure. And his whole thing was a consistent pursuit of excellence. He just didn't understand why you would not, and the same thing sometimes now, he gets knocked for being a quote perfectionist. And even when he was alive, that really bothered him, because he said, I don't understand a professional who is not. Why would you not be a perfectionist? As he said, when you go to the surgeon, do you ask for the sloppy guy? I mean, but he's been singled out because he also knew, I mean, it isn't just that it was his ego or anything. It was like, he was responsible. As director and choreographer, he's managing the budget, he's managing the rehearsal schedule, he's minding the store on everything, and he has to bring that picture in on time and on budget, because these are businesses, and he couldn't just dismiss all of that. And he, as a person, felt very responsible for, he abhorred wasting time, and he abhorred wasting money. Though I think a lot of that came out of the Depression as well, that it was just anathema to him. But You show up, you don't show up late, you know your lines, you have your work, and you don't screw up, because, and you owe that not only to yourself, but you owe that to the others involved. And these are massive numbers of people involved and massive numbers of lives. So I think he always said that you needed to have a pretty strong degree of confidence in what you were doing, and a lot of it, he knew that he could make these things work. So for example, with CoverGirl, in the alter ego number, he's dancing with himself. When the technicians and the director said it can't be done, Gene knew that if you moved the camera, if you connected the camera and his movement to musical beats, then it would all be in sync. So he doesn't have video playback. He can't see what he's doing, but he knows that if he's hit his mark and the camera has hit its mark and it's all connected to the music, that he got it. And so it was all mathematical and calculated in his head. And so I think to launch into something like that, you'd have to say he had a degree of confidence.
Yeah, and he must have had very strong leadership skills as well. I'm not sure if, obviously, in the context of, say, business, for example, leadership is commonly talked about, it's commonly discussed. But I'm just wondering, back then, was leadership a thing in the same way? But he must have had very strong leadership, you know, that whole idea of leading people, getting them to get to the standard where he needed them to be. I guess knowing when to maybe be a little bit assertive in the communication and knowing when perhaps somebody needed something a little bit lighter. Is it fair to say he would have developed those leadership skills in that scenario? I
think a lot of that was, it was different then, because I don't think it was described as leadership skills, but I think he was running a dance studio, the Gene Kelly Studio at the Dance in Pittsburgh and Johnstown, and he learned how to enlist these young kids to dance and get them to reach a quite high quality of dance. And that was the kind of same technique that he applied to other non-dancers like Debbie Reynolds or a Frank Sinatra. So he knew how to get the performance. He knew how to choreograph to their skills to make them look good, but he also knew how to work with them to get these. I mean, he said Sinatra trained like a prize fighter. And I've heard from a lot of people, and in fact, I just returned from London, and I attended a lot of wonderful performances, the Royal Variety performance, and also Old Friends, the Sondheim tribute. And I got to see some of my old friends, Bonnie Langford, who was with the Royal Variety show when Gene hosted it 40 years ago, and also Jenny Dee, who was there 40 years ago. And these are, very young women at that time. And Jenny Dee said that Gene just came along and said, "Sing out, kid, sing out, kid." And Bonnie Langford told me that he was so generous and so kind. And so I think he knew, he knew he had to be tough, but he also, it was kind of tough but tender. He had to make sure everybody was in sync and everybody was together. I think other dancers and choreographers really understand that, because that's what they live every day. I think some of the actors, it's a little harder. They're not used to that kind of discipline. I think animators understand it completely. Cinematographers understand it, camera operators. So it kind of depends who the person is and how they receive the information. But I've gotten so much mail from people who worked with him, talking about his generosity, his kindness, and so. But yeah, he was demanding. But the thing that always was interesting to me is that he never demanded more of other people than he demanded of himself. So he's not this tyrant and this He's not somebody dictator in a sense. He's the out there and doing an equal amount. So
It must be so nice to hear people talking so warmly about him.
it was,
You know, it must be amazing that for you.
It really was I mean, I can't tell you how many at the Royal Variety performance. Bradley Walsh did a lovely shout out to Jean, announcing to the audience that Jean had hosted the event 40 years ago, and he mentioned that I was in the audience, but it was just this phenomenal roar of the entire 5,000 plus seats. It just zoomed around. I was with my friend, the musical director Nigel Lilly, and we both just were. It was just so breathtakingly moving. I mean, it was hard not to get pretty teary about it, but
Yeah.
But then, because he had acknowledged me, then the people would see me out in the hallways, and they just started coming up to me and saying what he meant to them and how he had touched their lives. And these are the stars of Crazy for You in the West End, just coming up and just gushing about him, and the cast of The Little Big Things, and I have to say, one of the most powerful moments was when Hannah Waddingham, I gave her my card. I have cards with Jean's signature on them because I love his signature, and I just gave it to her. She walked into the reception and she sort of clocked me, and so I thought, well, this is an opportunity. So I just walked up and I handed her the card, and she looked at it, and I said, "That's my husband," and she just started crying. Big alligator tears started coming down her cheeks, and she said, he is the reason I am who I am and why I do what I do. And it was, I hear that from somebody nearly every day, if not every day, and from all walks of life, from every London cab driver. I give them my cards, and they're all like, "Oh yeah," and then they immediately recount the relationship with the growing up with their parents or their grandparents and how they're now showing the films to their kids. And so it's you talk about passion. It certainly is my passion, and part of my passion is to engage with people, because I feel like if you're not connecting with people, then what's the point? Why are we here on the planet? And yes, I have this wonderful kind of door opener, which is Gene Kelly and Gene's legacy. But I think you have to make those connections, and you have to sustain those, and you have to reach out even more. You have to show up. So I show up for the openings of Matthew Bourne's performances at Sadler's Wells. I show up for my friends at Scottish Ballet for their openings. They come to my house to see the archives when they tour here. I think it's the engagement that makes it really so worthwhile and so powerful. If I were just kind of not engaging with people around the world and just sort of sitting here at my desk promoting Gene's legacy, that it would have none of that power. The power is in seeing Hannah Waddingham and speaking so, as you said, authentically about the inspiration and so many people around the world. And so, yeah, it's a real joy. I just want to keep going as long as I can, and keep it going, and just, I could do it. As I say, I mean, if I would do it 24 hours a day, if I could. I love it so much. And I'm so touched by the messages I get from people. And I'm talking about these big stars, but also from the people who reach out to me on Instagram, the people who write to me on Facebook, and I do respond. So please share all of that information, because I'm so touched, and they'll send a little video of their 3-year-old in front of watching American in Paris or watching Singing in the Rain. And then I get to follow those kids. And now some of them are 18 and 19 years old. And so
just so deep and so meaningful. And in a world of struggles, I would say that it's perhaps more needed now more than ever. So, Patricia, thanks very much for joining me today. I can honestly say I could speak to you for another hour and a half, but I really appreciate your time. Just finally then, would you like to just tell people how they can communicate with you or access you if they want to utilize you or find out more about your shows? How do they communicate with you?
That's great. And I just, before that, I agree with you 100%, because I think that Gene always said, people would ask him, what's the meaning behind Singing in the Rain? And there's even a book that was put out about how it's really the underlayers. It's a political treatise on the McCarthy era. And Gene was just, and he said, no, he said, the purpose was to bring joy. And I think that is so important at any time, but I think now, and I think Gene's humanity, his humility, and that the importance, not diminishing the importance of bringing joy. And there was one little village in the UK during lockdown. There was a video that kind of went viral of all of these people. It started to rain, and they all came out of their houses, and they were all socially distanced, 6 feet apart on these streets. And they had Gene playing on the boombox, and they all brought out umbrellas, and they all danced and sang in the rain. And this was at the darkest hours of COVID, in the very early days. And I think Gene was a lifeline for many people during that period, and is a lifeline for many people during the darkest times. So I think that, again, is a privilege, something that I don't think he anticipated how meaningful his work would be, and the way he was, the way he represented himself, and the kind of man he was, how much that would mean going forward. But to your next point, I'm on Instagram at Gene Kelly Legacy, and I'm on Facebook at Gene Kelly The Legacy, and I'm on LinkedIn as my name, Patricia. My middle name is Ward, and last name Kelly. And I also hope to get the official website up and rolling again very soon, and that's genekelly.com. And I'll be posting all the upcoming shows there. But in the meantime, people can follow me. And also email is patriciakelly@genekelly.com. So if you don't hear from me, then send it again, because sometimes things get lost in this kind of wacky world. And I do respond. So don't ever think you're pestering me or anything, because I think, again, this is part of what's important. It's connecting, it's responding, it's a reciprocal relationship. And that's what Gene felt with his audiences on Broadway, that, yeah, he's up on stage doing this, but the audience is so vital. And that's what I feel with the work that I do. I could blast this out all the time, but what makes it work is this reciprocal relationship. So thank you. And I hope I'll see you in Manchester one of these days.
That would really be wonderful. And I have to say, and I kind of embarrass myself completely now, but I just know that all you ever have to hear is do 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 do. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. And you're there. So thanks ever so much for joining me today, Patricia. I've really enjoyed talking to you and sharing what is clearly a very passionate belief in what Gene was doing. And thank you for keeping it all alive.
Well, it's a privilege. And thank you so much for including me. And I do look forward. We'll have another we'll do this again. Let's do it again in a bit when I have a few more projects that I'm going to kick off. I try to create new things that just to keep new projects going. So it'd be fun when we get some of those going to chat again. So thank you.
We all like to do a part 2.
Perfect. Okay.
So we'll do
I love
part
it.
2 when you're ready. Thanks very much indeed, Patricia, and thanks for joining me early morning for my evening.
Take care. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.